Hello and welcome back to my channel. This is Everything April YouTube channel. You're highly welcome. If this is your first time checking out my video, you're welcome. And if you're a returning viewer, you're also welcome. Please, if you're yet to subscribe to this channel, please click on the subscribe button and also click on the notification bell so that you'll be notified every time I upload a new video. And please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. So today's video is on how you can easily make a beaded bubu kaftan. I will be taking you through how you can make the kaftan, how to attach the yoke, and how you can easily bead, the type of bead, the thread, and the needle to use in beading your kaftan. So please watch till the end of this video. So I folded my fabric into four, the front part into two and the back part into two. The length I'm using is 55 inches plus 1.5 inches hemming allowance. So I folded the back and the front separately. So I'm demonstrating how I folded. Assuming this paper is my Ankara, I measured the length for the front part and I folded that into two, folding the whole Ankara, the 45 into two. That's what I did that. I folded into two places for front and back. Or you can decide to measure out the length and then multiply that length, folding it into two and then folding into four, like I demonstrated. So you can choose the way you want to fold. So you should fold according to the length of the gown, and the width should be the measurement from the nape of the neck to the length to the sleeve where you want the sleeve to stop. So that should be how you would fold your fabric. So you can see the chopped part at the top that acts as my shoulder line. So on this line, I'm going to measure half of my shoulder measurement plus the length of my sleeve. So half of my shoulder measurement is 7 and the length of the sleeve I want is 11. So I measured that, and from that place I measured, I came down by 1.5 inches for the shoulder slope. So I'm going to measure out my neck width, which is 3 inches. So I'm going to draw out my shoulder slope from this 3 inches point I made to the 1.5 inches I came down by from where I want the sleeve to stop. So the total length I have on the shoulder is 18 inches. So I'll also be taking 3 inches for my neck depth, for the back neck depth. So I'll measure out 3 inches for the neck depth for the back, and I'm going to use my armhole curve to curve that out from the neck width to the neck depth. Then I'm going to take my sleeve opening, how wide or how open I want the sleeve to be. So I want a sleeve opening of 10 inches. I'm going to come down. I initially came down by 11, but I decided to come down by, from the shoulder slope, I came down by 10 inches. So choose whatever you want for your sleeve opening. I don't want it to be too big. So on this sleeve opening mark, I'm measuring what I have on the shoulder. I'm also putting that same measurements on these 10 inches I came down by from the shoulder slope. So now that I've done that, I'm going to measure from the shoulder line. I'm going to measure a length of 32 inches. So this 32 inches is 3 inches above my knee line. So you can decide to measure whatever measurements you have for your knee line. You can decide to come up by 2 inches or 3 inches. So I decided to come up by 3 inches from my knee line. So on this line, I measured quarter of my hip measurement plus extra 3 inches for ease and for sewing allowance, 2 inches for ease and 1 inch for sewing allowance. So the measurement I have on this 32 inches line, I'm going to still impute that exact same measurement on the hem of this gown I'm making. So I've done that. I've imputed what I have, and I'm going to join with a straight ruler. I'm joining the measurements from the 32 inches line down to the hem of the gown. Now I'm going to use freehand or a curved ruler to connect from the sleeve opening, where I want my sleeve opening to stop, down to the 32 inches line, just as I've demonstrated. So I've connected the from that point, the sleeve opening point, down to the 32 inches line. So I'm going to extend from that point. I extended 2 inches outward. Is for hemming my sleeve. So this 2 inches is for hemming my sleeve, and I'm curving it this way. As you can see, I just made a curve. I'm also adding that same 2 inches for hemming at the shoulder part, so that I can use these 2 inches to hem my sleeve. I would also go ahead to add seam allowance on the shoulder, half-inch seam allowance for joining the front and the back shoulder together. So that's what I've done. I've added seam allowance. So I'll go ahead and cut out this so that we can see what the gown looks like at this point. So I've cut out, and I've also drawn out the neck depth for the front to be 5 inches. That for the back is 3 inches. So I've cut out, this is what I have so far, and I'm yet to cut out the neckline. So I'll go ahead and cut out the back neckline first before I cut out the front neckline. So I'll cut out the back. After that, I'm going to remove the piece for the back, the fabric piece for the back, and then go ahead and cut out the neckline for the front as well. So now this is what I have for the front. I'm going to bring a plain fabric. So I have a plain fabric and it's on fold. On fold I have a width of 9 inches and the length is 40 inches. So I've placed it underneath my front part. So what I'm going to do is trace out the neckline just as I'm doing. The folded part should match both on the plain fabric and on the front piece. So I'm just going to trace out. So I'm cutting out a yoke that I want to attach to the front where I will be beading. So I'm tracing out the neckline and also the shoulder slope as you have seen me demonstrate. So you can see this 32 inches line I have. I'm going to note that on my plain fabric. You can see as I'm noting it, I've noted that. So I'm going to raise my front part and then cut out the pattern I want for this yoke. So I'm going to use a straight ruler to connect from the neckline to the 32 inches point I noted on the plain fabric. So I'm going to make a continuous line from the neckline down to that point I noted for the 32 inches point. So that is how long I want the yoke to be. So, and also how wide I want it to be. I want it to be with the neckline. The width should be as much as the neckline, and then the length should be 32 inches. So I'm connecting to that 32 inches point. So this is what I have. Okay, this is what I have. So I'm not going to cut directly on this line. I'm going to add half-inch seam allowance all along the line and also down at the point where I stopped. I'm going to add half-inches seam allowance all round. So I'll measure that out and then cut on this half-inches seam allowance I have added. That is how I'll cut out my yoke. So I've cut it out and now I've brought my front piece. I've opened it to the right side. So I've opened it and laid it flat. I opened also the yoke. So the wrong side of the yoke will be touching the right side of the fabric. So I'm matching it in a way, I'm aligning it in a way that the center part of the yoke is aligning with the center part of this front piece. So I'm going to make sure I lay it properly so that everything matches well. So what I will do will be the half-inch I added all round. I have to fold that half-inch in and then pin it. If possible, iron it so it stays in place and then use a pin to hold it on the main fabric, because what I will be doing will be to top stitch all round that half-inch I added. So before I do that, I'm going to use my pins to hold the yoke in place. I will be pinning the center part so that they all align. The center part of the yoke and the fabric, I'm pinning them together so that they align. Then I'm going to also fold in the half-inch I added and then pin it also to this the front piece, and then I'm going to top stitch close to the edge of the folded yoke. That's what I'll do. After doing that, I will then join the front and the back right sides facing each other. I'll join them by the shoulder. Then I'll use a bias strip to tidy up the neckline. After that, I'll also fold the sleeve parts 2 times. Remember, I added 2 inches hemming allowance and then hem it and close the sides. I'll also attach an inner pocket to this gown. So I'll do all that and then show you what I have. So as you can see, I top stitched so close to the edge so that the stitches will not be visible. So I've done that, I've ironed it out. Everything is lying very well. So I'm going to cut out this extra inch because I said I want it to be continuous with the neckline. So this extra here is just the extra for the half inch I added. So I'm going to cut that out. I'll cut this point out. I do not need it. So I'll also trim the neckline. So the neckline of the yoke and that of the front piece, they would align. I'm going to trim out the excesses I have. So after doing this now, just as I explained before, I'm going to bring the back part and then attach the back and the front by the shoulder. So I'm going to attach the two by the shoulder. Then I would also, like I explained before, hem the sleeve parts. I will close in the sides. I will leave about 12 to 14 inches slits at the lower parts to enable me work properly, and I'll also use bias to tidy up the neckline. So I'll do all that and show you. So this is what I have. I've done all that. You can see how beautiful it's looking already. So I've used bias to turn the neckline, to pipe the neckline. I also hemmed the sleeve parts. I also hemmed the lower part, and I also left a slit of about 12 inches. You can do up to 14 inches or the length that you're comfortable with. Okay, so this is what I have. So I would also iron properly. This is what the back looks like. So I'll iron properly before I start my beading. So for this project, I will be using crystal beads. So I'm using two sizes of crystal beads. I'm using a black color. I'm using size 6 crystal beads and size 4 crystal beads. So I think crystal beads, I want to use crystal beads because of the way they glister and they are very, very beautiful. So I'll be working with crystal beads. And then the next thing I'll be working, the third type of thread I will be using a nylon thread. I'll be using a nylon thread size 2. Okay, I'll be using this because compared to the normal sewing thread, they are very durable and sturdy and very, very strong. They don't cut. It's difficult to cut them, unlike the normal sewing thread. So as you can see, these are projects I've made with them. They are very, very flexible. When you work with them, the work comes out flexible and the color hides behind the color of the beads. As you can just see, you won't see the color of the thread. So I prefer working with this to the normal thread that would easily cut if you're using a sewing thread. But if you don't have a nylon thread, you can use a fishing line. So if you're using this size of crystal that I'm using, size 6 or size 4, please use a 0.35 mm fishing line. Use this size of fishing line so it will be able to carry your beads, because crystal beads are they are beads heavier than glass beads. Okay, so and for the needle, I'll also be using a beading needle. I'll be using a size 11 beading needle. You can use either size 11 or size 12 beading needle. So these are the things I will be using to bead today. So I would also like to say that the nylon thread comes in sizes just like the fishing lines. So I'm working with a size 2 nylon thread, but if you have a size 4, that will even be better. But I'm working with this size because it matches, it's close to the color of bead I'm using. So if you have a size 4 that matches with your bead color, you can also do that. That would be better. So I'm going to go ahead and thread my needle. So once I thread my needle, I'm going to take as much thread as I can handle. So I'm going to take, when taking your thread, make sure you take thread as much or as little as you can handle to prevent the thread from tangling as you are beading. So I'm going to take as much as I can handle and then cut it off. Cut off. So before I start beading, I'm going to arrange my fabric. I'm going to arrange it very well. I'm going to iron it because once I bead on it, I won't be able to iron the front part again. So I'm going to arrange it very well and iron it. So before I start, I'm going to measure where I want the first strand to start. So I'm arranging my fabric very well, arrange it so that the shoulders, everything is placed very well. So from where the plain fabric started, I'm going to go up by 1 inch on one side. So I'm noting that point. So I'm going to measure from the shoulder to this point I just noted. I'm going to measure from the shoulder to this point, and I have about 2.25 inches. So I'm going to measure from the shoulder of the other side 2.25 inches so that they will be corresponding. This is where my first strand will be. This will be one end of the first strand and this will be the other end of the first strand. So I'll go ahead and knot the end of my thread. So I'll knot and pass from one side. I'm passing from the back of one side to start adding my beads. So once I pass, I'm going to pass it back to the back part and I'm going to knot as much as possible. I'm not just going to make one knot because I don't want this to just loosen after the whole beading process. So I'm going to knot as much as I'm comfortable with. So I'll knot severally, 2, 3, 4 times, as much as I'm comfortable with. So I would do that before I start beading. So the same thing I'm doing using this thread is the same way you bead if you're the same way you knot if you're also using a fishing line. Not as much times as possible. So the same thing I do using a thread. If you're using nylon thread or if you're using a fishing line, just do the same thing because they are just the same um thing. So I would open my bead rather than pour it in a plate. I'm going to open my bead just one end from the strand because the beads, they come in strands as you buy them. So I'll open one end of the strand rather than pour it in a plate. I think this is easier. I'll just pass my needle. I'll pass my needle through the beads on the strand as they're on the strand. So I think for me it is easier to do it and faster to do it this way. And I think you might also find it faster. So I'll keep passing my needle through the beads on the strand. So I'll be passing them to the strand I'm making. I think it's easier to make it this way. So I will keep passing them. Okay, so you can see what I have in matter of seconds. I've already passed some strands. So I would go ahead and keep on picking. So as you're passing, as more fishing line is coming off, you can just cut it off and then keep passing your beads, your needle through the beads, and you pick till you get to the desired length. So that's what I'll do. I'm going to keep picking till I get to the desired length I want for the first strand. So as I'm taking my beads, I'm checking to make sure to know if I've gotten to the point I want. So I'll keep picking like this till I get to the desired length I want. So like I said before, I would highly encourage that when you're making this bead, you use a nylon thread or a fishing line, and I would really not advise that you use a sewing thread to bead to so that the beading would last, so that your work would last. So I'm checking, I've gotten to the length I want. So I've gotten to the end. So the way you check and make sure that the beads are relaxed and dropping. You can see what I have, and then make sure that once it gets to the other end, it's relaxed and you can easily pass it. You can see how I'm checking my bead. It's all relaxed on the neck region, and then make sure that it gets to the exact point I want to stop at. So I'm checking what I have. So when I checked, the beads were over by one, so I removed the one, and then I'll go ahead and make a knot on this other end. So I've gotten to the end where I want. So I'm passing, you can see how I'm passing from the back as well. So I'm going to make a knot, but before I make my first knot, I'm going to draw and make sure that there is no remaining thread on on the on the strands I've already made. So you don't want a situation you finish beading and the thread is showing. So I'm going to drag it tight as I'm knotting so that there will be no thread remaining on the strand I've already made. So I don't know if you understand what I'm saying. So as you're passing, you're knotting in a way that add on the already made strand, there will be no extra thread showing. So everything will be tight and the beads will be packed together. So I'm going to go ahead the same way I knotted before I started beading. That's the same way I'm going to knot after each strand. So I've finished one strand, so I'm going to go ahead and knot as much as 3 or 4 times, or how many times I'm comfortable with. So I will knot over and over till I'm confident and comfortable that it's not going to get loosened easily. So for the first strand, you can see I've knotted as much as possible. And what I'm going to do now will be to pass my thread to the next point where I would start beading this second strand. So I'll be passing from the back side. So I'm going to give a space or an interval of 3/4 or half inch from each strand. So from the first strand, I'm moving by 3/4 of an inch to start the second beading. So when I put my thread from the back to the 3/4 inch I want to start my second strand from, I'm going to notch just like I did when I started the first strand. I'm going to notch as much as 3 times or 4 times. So I'm going to notch severally before I start picking up my beads and stringing my beads on this thread I'm holding. So I've knotted as much as possible. I've started stringing my beads and picking up my beads on the strands. So I'll pick as much, and as I'm picking, I'm checking if I have enough. So while making the subsequent strands, like I'm making the second strand, I'm going to make, bearing in mind that I don't want the first strand to overlap the second. So as I'm beading, I'll make sure that the first strand does not cross over to the second strand. So the first should not overlap the second, and the second should not overlap the third, just like that. There shouldn't be an overlapping of the beads. They should be able to relax on their own without crossing over to the next bead. I don't know if I'm making any sense. So you can see as I'm checking it, I don't want the first strand crossing over to the second strand. So as I'm beading, I'll make sure that at a relaxed point, the first strand does not cross over to the second strand. So when I make sure of that, when I pick my beads and make sure that I'm comfortable and happy with what I have, I'll go ahead and make knots just like I did for the first, when I made the first strand. So when I get to the point where I want, I'm going to also make sure that at corresponding 3/4 inch interval on this other side, the side I'm taking it to, then I'm going to cross over to the back and then also knot tightly like I did for the first strand. I will knot as many times as possible so that it will be strong as well. And remember what I said, when knotting, make sure that there is no remaining thread on the line you've already picked, on the strand you already have. So you drag it in a way that there will be no space or slacking rope so that it will be tight and fine. So like I said before, I highly recommend you use a fishing line or a nylon thread. But if you must use a sewing thread, I will advise that when you string a strand, when you've made a strand, that you pass back your needle through the strand you already have. You should pass your thread through those strands for 2 or 3 or 4 more times so that it will make it strong, so that the thread will be able to carry these beads, because the beads are they are heavy, the crystal beads are heavy. So I would advise that if you must use a sewing thread, please cross your thread over through the beads. Just like I have 2 strands now, for instance, I would have to cross after each strand. I will cross back my needle through those beads on the strand and cross it over again. That's crossing it 2 times to make it 3 times. I've crossed the thread before I start making another strand. That's how you should make it if you're using a sewing thread, so that it will be durable and strong enough. So I will go on. I'm already knotting the end for this one, so I'll go ahead. This is how I'll keep on passing. Once I start a new line, I'm going to knot as much as 3 to 4 times. Then after beading that line, I'm going to knot again. So I don't think I'll be able to show everything on camera, so I'll go ahead and keep beading off camera, but I'll show you my progress as I go along. Remember, I said I'm doing 3/4 inch intervals, but you can do half-inch intervals. So I keep crossing from one end to the other and making sure that my beads are not overlapping. So that's what I'll do. As I'm doing, I'll go ahead and show you my progress. So at this point, please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. If you're watching and you have not subscribed to my channel, please remember to subscribe and also click the notification bell to be notified when I upload a new video. So this is what I have so far. This is how far I have gone. Okay, this is it. As you can see, there is no bead overlapping, so I will go ahead and keep beading till I get to the end of my beading, and I'll show you what I have. So this is it, guys, on how you can make your beaded kaftan bubu. Thank you for watching. Give this video a thumbs up and subscribe if you're yet to subscribe. Don't forget to click on the notification bell so that you'll be notified every time I upload a new video. See you in my next video. Bye.